Now, what may I do for you, Senor
Salamanca. Eduardo Salamanca, but you can call me Lalo. And you're Gustavo Fring.
This video contains spoilers for Better Call Saul through Season 6, Episode 5. If you're interested in this great character who only really has one problem, but you haven't watched that far yet, then this isn't the video you're looking for. There was a point in Season 4 of Better Call Saul where, if I'm being honest, I struggled to care what was going on with the story about Gus building his super lab. I knew it would eventually get completed. I knew that Gus and Mike would both survive the series, and I knew that none of the Germans involved would play a significant role in Breaking Bad. More than that, it felt like the whole cartel side of the story needed something to make it feel vital, because it was drifting away from the main story about Jimmy McGill. Sure, Mike needed to continue his descent to become the guy we knew him to be in the original series, but the writers had the problem of working against the nature of the show since it's a prequel. They met this challenge by introducing a new character from the Salamanca family. That pesky brood of characters who all sort of have that person you hope you never find yourself mixed up with temperament about them. Eduardo Salamanca, aka Lalo, was a nephew of Hector that was previously unknown, and a cousin to Tuco, Marco, and Leonel. His name was first mentioned in that much-discussed throwaway line in the desert from Saul Goodman's first episode that also gave us Nacho. Jimmy's fear there hinted that their paths would eventually cross, and that he must be a pretty imposing character to still be on his mind 4 years later. That is not terribly surprising. The Salamancas all have that going for them. They manage to be great antagonists despite the fact that they're a bit one-dimensional, with that one dimension being they're unstable and potentially violent. It was clear from his very first scene that Lalo stood out from the other members in that regard. When Nacho found him cooking in the kitchen of the restaurant the family runs their drug business out of, I didn't know he was related until he said it out loud. He was cooking like we'd seen Tuco do before, but he came off as the type of guy you wanted to get to know better, rather than generally making your skin crawl. Of course, in the next episode, he cleared up any confusion that he might just be a black sheep when he murdered an absolutely innocent clerk at Travel Wire while following Mike. He exposed himself as a cold-blooded killer, leaving no room for debate. The show knows how captivating Tony Dalton can be in this role, and seemed to balance that out by having him periodically do something that reminds us of his brutality in case we might forget. It's part of what makes it work. He's fascinating because of this capacity to be more than one thing at the same time. It's the perfect mixture of charm and menace that makes you warm up to him in every scene while fearing what he might do next. He's absolutely dastardly, but has a few redeeming things mixed in there to keep it interesting. He appeared to care about the people at his compound, and even though he didn't have a problem killing his body double Mateo, the look on his face before that happened indicated that he didn't enjoy it, although there wasn't much to say he had remorse beyond that. And the scene where he noticed the family of Fred from Travel Wire in the courtroom without skipping a beat seems to back that up. He breathed life back into the cartel side of things by being a worthy adversary for Gus, and by hiring Jimmy as his lawyer, he solved the problem of the two different stories drifting apart. He matches up well with both of these characters. Gus isn't able to outmaneuver him, and Jimmy isn't able to outtalk him. He's a nearly perfect character that even this late in the story integrates seamlessly. He's a fan favorite that only seems to get better, and the only problem there is that Lalo Salamanca must die. I say must because I don't see any way around it. He has to go down, and it has to happen before the end of this season. Of course, it's always possible that the show could swerve hard into new territory, but even then something fairly contrived would have to happen. I mean, could Lalo get hit on the head in Germany and wake up with amnesia in the hospital under an assumed identity? Technically, yes, but that doesn't feel like the show we've been watching. Plus, they've been leaning in hard to the effect that his being out there in the world is having on Gus. The chicken man, who is usually composed and calculated, is currently falling apart. So how would you explain his getting it together if this threat were still out there? I've seen a lot of comments asking if he can make it out of the series alive. Could he show up in the Gene timeline? Could he just generally outlive everyone? But I don't really see a path to that. I think some of this comes from the fact that Jimmy was still afraid of him in that scene in the desert. The counter argument to that is what Gus says to Hector when he goes to gloat about killing the cartel during the Breaking Bad timeline. He tells him that Jesse killed the only other Salamanca who was left alive, his grandson Joaquin, and says that the Salamanca name will die with Hector, which basically completes his revenge arc, and he looks absolutely certain that it's the truth. The Gus in Better Call Saul Season 6 wouldn't be able to make that claim. Also, none of the cartel stuff from the original series makes sense if Lalo is still out there somewhere. Bolsa and Eladio would have to still think he's dead, and Hector would just have to be there not knowing what happened to him after he found out he was alive. With his ending, Nacho provided cover for everything to make sense as long as Lalo doesn't reemerge. He's already faked his death once, and Gus didn't actually believe it, and things seem to be setting up for a final confrontation, which we know he can't win. So in my mind, the question is not if Lalo will die, it's when. I suppose if you wanted to nitpick the character, he can be borderline superhero-ish, and that is something that pops up every now and again when he escapes out a two-story window or something along those lines. But in light of the situation, that sort of works in the favor of the upcoming conclusion. In order to defeat him, Gus will have to outdo himself, and that should make for a memorable ending. There's also the possibility that he could bring more about Mr. Fring to light in the process, and that means he could have a lasting influence on the story after he's gone. Lalo is dashing, he's dynamic, he's been a great addition to this late part of the series, and he's gonna have to get out of the way so the story can move on. And I think that is a good place to leave things. Let me know in the comments how you think his story might end. Right now it all feels like it's heading towards a showdown in the Super Lab, but do you think there's room for a twist? Does Nacho's ending playing out exactly how it should have make you suspicious? Do you think that they'll go a different direction here? Or do you think it's just going to be a fascinating showdown where one menacing character outdoes the other? Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.